Ava Calloway never thought the two people who brought him into this world would be the same two people determined to keep him from ever building a life in it. She didn't think about it, not at first, because when you grow up trusting your parents the way most kids trust gravity, just assuming it'll always hold you up, the idea that they could be the ones pulling the floor out from under you feels too dark, too impossible, too cruel to even consider. And yet, here I am, telling you this story. Because it happened. Every single painful, infuriating, heartbreaking word of it. I spent 14 months applying to job after job, interview after interview, getting so close I could taste it, and then watching everything evaporate without explanation. 14 months of, we've decided to move in a different direction. 14 months of HR, going suddenly cold after what should have been a great phone screen. 14 months of sitting in my car in parking lots, staring at rejection emails on my phone, trying to figure out what the heck I was doing wrong. I updated my resume. I rewrote my cover letters. I practiced interview answers in front of my bathroom mirror at midnight. I did everything right. Everything. And still nothing. The doors kept closing. I started thinking, maybe I just wasn't good enough. Maybe my degree didn't mean what I thought it did. Maybe the universe was trying to tell me something, but it wasn't the universe. It was my parents. When I finally found out the truth, when I heard it with my own ears in a recorded phone call, in my own father's voice, I felt something shift inside me that I don't think has ever fully shifted back. It wasn't just anger. It wasn't just hurt. It was this deep, bone-level grief for the childhood version of me that had loved those people so completely, so unconditionally. That kid deserved better. And so did I. So I decided to make sure they finally understood exactly what they'd done. And I decided to do it in a way they would never, ever forget. To understand any of this, you've got to understand where I came from. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, the kind of mid-sized Midwestern city where everybody knows somebody who knows somebody, where the same families have lived on the same streets for 3 generations, where your reputation follows you like a shadow you can't shake. My dad, Robert Calloway, ran a small auto repair shop that his father had started. It wasn't glamorous, but it was his, and he was proud of it in that quiet, chest-puffed-out way that certain men are proud of things they built with their hands. My mom, Carol, worked part-time at the front desk of a dental office and spent the rest of her time managing everyone else's business, which she was significantly better at than anyone in the family ever gave her credit for. We weren't poor. We weren't rich. We were that perfectly average American family that had enough to be comfortable, but never quite enough to stop worrying. Dad drove a 10-year-old F-150 and complained every time gas prices went up. Mom clipped coupons and bought store-brand everything, but somehow still managed to make Christmas feel magical every year. There was a decency to our household, or at least what felt like decency from the outside. A tidy ranch house on Elmwood Drive. A backyard with a dying oak tree my dad kept swearing he was going to cut down, but never did. A golden retriever named Buck, who was dumber than a bag of hammers, and the most beloved creature any of us had ever known. I have a sister, Jessica. She's 2 years older than me, and growing up, she was everything I wasn't, at least in our parents' eyes. Jessica was easy. She smiled at the right times, said the right things, never pushed back, never questioned. She got decent grades without anyone having to push her. She dated the right kind of boys and came home before curfew. She was, in the language of our household, the good one. And I was, by comparison, the complicated one. Not because I was a bad kid, I really wasn't, but because I had the audacity to have opinions, to push back, to want things that didn't fit neatly into my parents' plans for me. The tension between me and my dad started early. He always expected I'd take over the shop eventually. It was just understood. The way a lot of things in our family were just understood, meaning no one ever actually said it out loud, but everyone behaved as though it had been signed and notarized. But I didn't want the shop. I wanted something different. I was good at numbers, good at patterns, good at looking at a spreadsheet and seeing the story it was trying to tell. My high school economics teacher, Mr. Farrow, told me once that I had the kind of analytical mind that corporate finance firms pay very good money for. And those words planted a seed in me that I spent the next 4 years carefully watering. I got into Ohio State on a partial academic scholarship and declared a finance major. My dad thought it was pretentious. He didn't say it exactly like that, but the way he said, college is fine, I guess, but you can learn more in 1 week at the shop than in 4 years in some classroom, pretty much communicated the same thing. My mom was more supportive, outwardly at least. She came to my orientation. She bought me dorm supplies from Target. She cried when they dropped me off. But even she, in quiet moments, would say things like, just remember where you come from. Ava, don't get too big for your britches. As if wanting a career in finance was somehow a betrayal of the family rather than a natural extension of my abilities. Then there was the incident. The thing my parents would hold over me in one form or another for the rest of my life, or so they planned. The summer before my junior year of college, I was back home, bored and restless, hanging out with some old high school friends. One night, 2 of the guys decided it would be hilarious to spray paint the underpass on Route 4. I was there. I didn't spray anything. I was literally standing 20 feet away, looking at my phone, not even paying attention. But when a cop rolled up, I was there, and being there was apparently enough. We all got cited for vandalism. I was given a deferred adjudication, meaning if I stayed out of trouble for a year, the charge would be dismissed and my record would remain clean. I did everything I was supposed to do. Community service, paid the fine, stayed completely clear. The charge was dismissed. I had no criminal record. 0. None. The slate was officially wiped clean. But my parents never let it go. My dad talked about it like I'd robbed a bank. You've got a record? Ava, you gotta be careful about that. I tried explaining multiple times that I didn't actually have a record anymore, that the charge had been dismissed, that this was exactly what deferred adjudication was designed for. He'd nod slowly, the way people nod when they're not really listening, and then say something like, still, it follows you. My mom was more subtle about it. She'd bring it up sideways in the middle of conversations about completely unrelated things, like, well, given everything, maybe you shouldn't aim quite so high with that application. I thought they were just being overly cautious, overly worried, in that specific parental way that's annoying but ultimately harmless. I had no idea how wrong I was. I graduated from Ohio State with a 3.7 GPA and a finance degree, and a genuine belief that I was about to start the life I'd been building toward. I moved back to Dayton temporarily, just to save money while I job hunted, classic millennial move, and started sending out applications. I was going for mid-level analyst positions at financial firms, insurance companies, corporate finance departments. The kind of entry-level to mid-level roles that a new grad with solid credentials should be a reasonable candidate for. And at first, it seemed like it was going to work. I was getting callbacks. I was landing phone screens. I had 3 first-round interviews within my first month of applying. The first one was at a financial planning firm called Meridian Group, based in Columbus. The phone screen went great. The recruiter, a woman named Dana, told me she was excited to move me forward and that I'd be hearing about an in-person interview within the week. I spent 3 days preparing. I researched the company inside and out, practiced my answers, picked out my outfit the night before. Then Dana called back 4 days later, and her voice had completely changed. Flat. Professional in that specifically cold way that means someone is choosing words very carefully. We've decided to move in a different direction with our candidate pool. We appreciate your interest. I asked if there was any feedback she could share. She hesitated. Just a beat too long, that half-second pause that means someone is deciding whether to say the real thing. And then said, just keep polishing your application. Good luck. I was disappointed, but not alarmed. These things happen. On to the next one. Except the next one went the same way. And the one after that. I had a second-round interview at an insurance company in Dayton, actually made it to the second round, which felt like progress, and then absolute silence. I followed up twice, got a form email. The position was filled internally. Then I had what felt like a genuinely amazing interview at a regional bank downtown. The hiring manager, a guy named Paul, shook my hand at the end and said, honestly, Ava, you're exactly the kind of candidate we've been looking for. I'm going to talk to HR today. I drove home feeling, for the first time in months, like things were actually going to happen. 2 days later, HR called to say they were no longer moving forward with external candidates. This is when the confusion started bleeding into something darker. I began replaying every interview in my head, looking for the mistake, the misstep, the thing I'd said or done that had tanked my chances. I rehearsed different versions of every conversation, trying to figure out where I'd gone wrong. Maybe I was too eager. Maybe not eager enough. Maybe my answers were too rehearsed. Maybe not rehearsed enough. The mental spiral was exhausting. My girlfriend, Mia, would watch me pace around our apartment. We'd moved in together that fall, a modest 2-bedroom in Kettering, with this look on her face that was equal parts love and worry. "Ava, you have to stop doing this to yourself," she'd say, handing me a cup of coffee and sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "You're one of the smartest people I know. There is nothing wrong with your applications. Something else is going on." "Like what?" I'd ask, genuinely asking, not rhetorical. She'd shrug, frustrated on my behalf. "I don't know, but it doesn't make sense. You've been to 9 interviews now? And nothing. That's not a you problem. That's something systemic." Mia worked as a nurse at Miami Valley Hospital. She was practical, grounded, and almost terminally honest, which was sometimes annoying and always exactly what I needed. She kept encouraging me. She covered more than her share of rent without making me feel terrible about it. She believed in me in that quiet, steady way that doesn't require performances or speeches, just shows up in the small daily gestures. I don't think I would have survived those 14 months intact without her. My dad, meanwhile, had a new suggestion every time I came over for Sunday dinner. "The shop could really use someone to handle the books, he'd say, not looking up from his plate. "Good steady work. You'd have a future there." My mom would nod along, and I'd feel this familiar tightening in my chest, this combination of love and frustration that I'd been feeling since I was about 12 years old. I always changed the subject. I didn't want to fight. I didn't want to be ungrateful for what my dad was offering. But I also wasn't going to give up on the life I'd been working toward since I was 18. I'd come too far. The months kept piling up. 4 months of rejections became 8. 8 became 11. I started applying more broadly. Smaller companies, different cities, roles that were a step below what I'd originally targeted. Same result. I applied to a corporate position at a logistics company in Cincinnati. Got to the final round. Lost it. I applied to a budgeting analyst role at a healthcare system in Columbus. They went with another candidate. I applied to a regional credit union in Dayton. Never heard back at all. By month 12, I had applied to 63 jobs. 63. I know the exact number because I kept a spreadsheet, because when you're drowning, you hold on to whatever structure you can find. The depression hit slowly, then all at once. I stopped going to the gym. I stopped meeting up with friends. I'd spend hours on the couch watching finance YouTube channels, simultaneously trying to learn more and feeling worse about the fact that I wasn't using any of it. My best friend Tyler, who'd known me since the 4th grade and could read me like a book, showed up at my apartment one Saturday afternoon with a 6-pack of Modelo and zero patience for my self-pity. "Dude," he said, settling into the armchair across from me, "I need you to hear me out. I've been watching this for almost a year now, and something is genuinely wrong. Not with you, with the situation. Have you considered the possibility that someone is actually messing with your applications?" I stared at him. "Like who?" He was quiet for a second. "I don't know, man. It doesn't add up. You're qualified. You interview well. I've heard you practice. You're good. So what's the X factor?" I didn't have an answer, but the question stuck with me. The answer came from the last place I expected, and it came on an ordinary Wednesday afternoon in March. I was at the kitchen table, laptop open, drafting yet another cover letter, when my phone buzzed. The caller ID said Dave Hartman. I knew Dave. He was a family friend, had gone to high school with my parents back in the day, showed up at barbecues and Christmas parties with a loud laugh and a perpetual Red Sox hat despite living in Ohio his entire life. He was a good guy, easy to talk to. I hadn't heard from him in probably 2 years. "Hey, Dave," I answered, surprised. "Ava. Hey, buddy. Listen, I need to talk to you about something, and I want you to know, before I say it, that I went back and forth about calling you. I don't want to stir anything up, but I also think you deserve to know. My stomach dropped. That specific phrase, "you deserve to know," is never followed by good news. I close my laptop. Okay, what's going on? I work in HR now. Did you know that? At Forrester Financial, over on Miller Road. We had a posting for an analyst position about 2 months back, and I recognized your name when your application came through. I was actually excited for you. I thought I could put in a good word internally, so I flagged your file. I remember applying there. I said, I never heard anything back. That's because we got a phone call, Dave said. There was a pause, and in that pause, something cold moved through me. About a week after your application came in, someone called our main HR line, said they were a former employer of yours, said you had a history of theft, and that you had a criminal record for vandalism that you'd been concealing on your applications. The room felt like it tilted. I actually put my hand on the table to steady myself. What? Yeah, our policy is we take those calls seriously. We flagged your application as ineligible and closed it out. I didn't find out until recently when I was going through old files and saw the note. And then I started putting things together. And Ava, I recognized the voice description in the intake notes. The person who took the call wrote down that it was an older male, local area code, mentioned the shop. I think he stopped. Say it, Dave. A beat of silence. I think it was your dad. I don't remember the rest of that phone call. I remember thanking Dave. I remember telling him I'd be in touch. I remember hanging up and sitting absolutely still for probably 5 minutes, staring at the grain of the kitchen table, my mind doing this slow, terrible rotation through the implications of what I'd just heard. Then I stood up, walked to the bathroom, and threw cold water on my face, because I needed to be sure I wasn't catastrophizing, wasn't leaping to conclusions, wasn't making the worst possible assumption about my own father based on one piece of secondhand information. But the thing is, it fit. It fit in the awful, interlocking way that pieces of a puzzle fit when you finally get them right and realize the picture they're making is something terrible. The way every single opportunity had gone cold after the reference check stage. The way my dad always knew which companies I'd applied to because I told him, because we had Sunday dinners and he'd ask how the job search was going, and I'd update him like an idiot. The way he'd been casually steering me back toward the shop for over a year. The way my mom kept suggesting maybe I should adjust my expectations. All of it began crystallizing into something I desperately did not want to be true. I called 3 other companies I'd applied to. I didn't identify myself right away. I called as though I were conducting a survey about their HR practices. 2 of them wouldn't give me anything. But the third one, a logistics firm in Cincinnati, had a young HR coordinator who was either too new or too honest to know she shouldn't be talking to me. She confirmed that yes, they had received an unsolicited reference call about a candidate with my name. The caller was a woman, she said, an older woman who identified herself as a family associate, said she felt she had a moral obligation to alert the company. Mom, it was both of them. My dad had been calling the companies that required a voice he could plausibly explain, identifying himself as a former employer. My mom had been calling the others. 2 parents coordinating, systematically destroying every professional opportunity one had, while sitting across from me at Sunday dinner asking how the job search was going. While my mom cried when I seemed discouraged and told me not to give up. While my dad offered me a job at the shop with a look on his face I now understood was not generosity but calculation. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a Kroger for an hour because I'd left the apartment to get some air, and I didn't know where else to go. I cried. Not the quiet, controlled kind of crying you can do in public without anyone noticing. The ugly, shaking kind. The kind that comes from grief. Because that's what this was. This was grief. The people I believed in my bones loved me unconditionally had been proving methodically for over a year that their love had very specific conditions. And one of them was that I stay close to home, close to them, tied to the shop and their plans for my life, no matter what I wanted. I didn't go to Sunday dinner the following week. I said I wasn't feeling well. I needed time to think without looking at their faces. Because I absolutely knew that if I walked into that house and sat across from them right now, I would either say something I couldn't take back, or I would somehow convince myself I'd gotten it wrong. Neither of those outcomes served me. I told Mia everything that night. She sat on the couch and listened without interrupting, which was something she was genuinely skilled at. And when I finished, she didn't say anything for about 30 seconds. Then she said, quietly and very clearly, "Ava, that's a crime." I know. Like, an actual crime. Defamation. Tortious interference. That's not just messed up family drama. That's legally actionable. I know that too. So what do you want to do? And here's the thing. I'd been sitting with that question for 48 hours, turning it over and over. The obvious answer was to confront them directly. Get it out, yell it out, demand an explanation, demand an apology. But I'd grown up with these people. I knew exactly how that conversation would go. My dad would get defensive and loud, and suddenly he'd be the victim. My mom would cry and say I was being dramatic and misunderstanding everything. I'd leave that house with nothing, no accountability, no closure, nothing except maybe a reputation in the family for being paranoid and ungrateful. I needed more than my own word and a second-hand HR coordinator. I needed something they couldn't deny. I need proof, I said. Real, undeniable proof. And then I need to figure out exactly how to use it. Mia nodded slowly. Then let's get it. Tyler came over that weekend, and the three of us sat around my kitchen table and built a plan. Tyler was, among other things, one of the sharpest people I knew when it came to this kind of thing. Not because he was devious by nature, but because he thought in systems. He could map out the logical flow of a situation the way other people can map out directions. First thing, he said, tapping his pen on his notepad, you need documentation from HR in writing. Dave's testimony is good, but paper is better. Ask him if he can get you anything from the file, a copy of the intake note, a log of the call, anything with a timestamp and a description. Dave came through. He couldn't give me official company records. There were liability concerns, but he was able to describe, in a detailed, personal email, exactly what the intake notes said. The date, the time, the caller's description, the specific claims they'd made. He also confirmed that the local area code matched the one I'd grown up with. He said he was sorry. He said he felt terrible that he hadn't looked into it sooner. I told him he'd already done more than he had to. And I meant it. The Cincinnati company's HR coordinator was willing to send me an email confirmation as well. She was young and apparently had a strong sense of right and wrong because she wrote me a detailed account of the call her company had received and included a physical description of what the caller had said. She noted the caller was female, spoke with an Ohio accent, claimed to be a close family associate, and specifically used the phrase moral obligation, the exact phrase my mom used constantly in everyday life when she was about to say something she knew was going to be uncomfortable for someone else. That left the recording. I needed to hear it myself, needed to have something concrete and undeniable. Ohio is a one-party consent state for recordings, meaning as long as I was a participant in the conversation, I could legally record it. I called my dad one afternoon under the pretense of asking for advice about the job search, because I'd been doing that periodically, playing the confused, struggling kid, while internally I was a different person entirely now. I asked him directly what he thought employers looked for when they called references. He was quiet for a moment, and then he said, well, the thing is, Ava, some employers, the careful ones, they do their homework. They don't just take your word for things. They look into backgrounds. They make calls. And when there's something in someone's past, people tend to find out eventually. What do you mean by that, Dad? I asked, keeping my voice as neutral as humanly possible. I just mean that the vandalism thing, that kind of thing, follows a person. Even if the record is technically clean. People in business, they talk to each other. Word gets around. Are you saying someone might have told my potential employers about that? A pause. Too long. I'm just saying it's a small world, kid, especially in a town like Dayton. It wasn't a confession on tape, but it was exactly the kind of carefully worded, knowing non-denial that would sound damning in the right context. And combined with everything else, Dave's email, the HR coordinator's account, the pattern of rejections perfectly aligned with companies I'd told my father I was applying to. It was enough. I consulted an attorney, a woman named Rachel Lee, who specialized in employment law and had a no-nonsense manner that I found immediately reassuring. I laid out everything I had. She looked at me across her desk when I finished, and she said, "This is tortious interference with business relations and potentially civil defamation. The fact that the deferred adjudication resulted in a dismissal and left no criminal record means that any representation otherwise is factually false. You have a civil case here, Ms. Calloway. What are my options?" I asked. "We send a formal demand letter as a first step. If they don't respond appropriately, we file. But before you decide what to do legally, I'd recommend thinking about what outcome you actually want. Compensation? An apology? Change behavior? The legal route gets you the first. The other two are less guaranteed." I thought about that for a long time. What did I want? I wanted my parents to understand what they had done, to really understand it, not to apologize reflexively the way people apologize when they're caught, with more regret about getting caught than about the thing itself. I wanted there to be witnesses. I wanted the people who had watched my dad give speeches at family dinners about values and responsibility and supporting your kids to see the whole truth. And I knew exactly when that opportunity was coming. Jessica had gotten engaged in February. Her fiancé, Brandon, was a perfectly decent guy who worked in insurance and laughed at all the right moments and had the kind of unassuming niceness that made him easy to be around. Their engagement party was scheduled for the second Saturday in April at my parents' house. Naturally, because everything in our family happened at my parents' house, because that was the center of our universe, the gravitational pull no one questioned. The guest list was the usual cast of characters. Aunts, uncles, cousins, family friends, neighbors who'd known us since before I could walk. My dad had already told me he was going to say a few words about family. I spent the 2 weeks between my attorney's consultation and the party quietly putting things in order. I accepted a job offer. It came from a firm in Chicago, a mid-sized financial consulting company called Larkin and Associates that I'd applied to without telling anyone, using Mia's email address to receive communications just to be safe. They'd offered me a position as a junior financial analyst, a real one with a real salary and real benefits and a real future. I accepted. I gave them my start date of May 1st. Then I signed a lease on a one-bedroom apartment in the Lincoln Park neighborhood. Mia and I had talked it through, and she was going to join me at the end of the month after transitioning her nursing license and lining up a position at a Chicago hospital. We were leaving Dayton. Permanently. I applied for a legal name change on my professional profiles. Not my actual name, just a slight adjustment in how I listed references and formatted my contact information. A clean break from the infrastructure my parents had been exploiting. I had Rachel prepare the formal demand letter and told her to hold it. I wanted to deliver it in person or as close to that as possible. And I prepared the presentation I was going to make at that party. Tyler helped me organize it. We put together a clean, simple series of documents, printed, bound, professional looking. It included Dave's email, the HR coordinator's written account, a timeline of every application and subsequent rejection, and a printed transcript of my recorded conversation with my father. I made 8 copies, 1 for my parents, 1 for Jessica, 1 for Brandon, 1 for my aunt and uncle on my dad's side, who were essentially the family elders and whose opinion carried significant weight, and a few extras because I didn't know exactly who would be there. On the night before the party, Mia found me standing in the kitchen at midnight, staring out the window at the dark street. She came up behind me and put her arms around me and rested her chin on my shoulder. "You doing okay?" Honestly, I don't know. I admitted. Part of me keeps hoping I'm wrong. That somehow I've misread this whole thing. You're not wrong. I know I'm not wrong. That's the part that's hard. She turned me around and looked at me directly. And she said something I wrote down later because I didn't want to forget it. What they did was not love, Ava. Real love doesn't trap you. What you're doing tomorrow isn't revenge. It's the truth. And you deserve to have the truth heard. I didn't sleep much that night. But when I woke up on Saturday morning, I was steady. I got dressed in the same outfit I'd worn to interviews, my good dark blue blazer, gray slacks, the tie Mia had given me for my birthday. If I was going to do this, I was going to do it looking like the professional I'd always been, despite everything they'd done to stop me from becoming one. My parents' house looked the way it always looked for family gatherings. Warm yellow lights spilling through the windows, cars parked all the way down Elmwood Drive, the sound of voices and laughter drifting out into the cool April evening. My Aunt Karen's green minivan was in the driveway. Uncle Phil's truck was parked across the street. The Hendersons, the family's oldest friends, were there. Dave was there. Though he didn't know what I was planning, I hadn't told him. I didn't want to put him in an awkward position. He'd already done enough. Mia and I walked in together. She squeezed my hand once, then let go because she knew I needed to do this part on my own. My mom came bustling over immediately, warm and performative in that way she was at family events. "Ava, you made it. You look so nice." She hugged me. She smelled like her gardenia perfume, the same one she'd worn since I was little. Something complicated moved through me. I hugged her back. My dad was holding court in the living room, standing with a beer in one hand and telling a story to Phil and a couple of the neighbors. He was laughing, relaxed, at home in the center of his world, the patriarch, the respected man who had built his family from the ground up and done right by everyone in it. He caught my eye and nodded. "Hey kid, glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said. Jessica found me in the kitchen about 20 minutes in, glowing with engagement happiness, her ring catching the light every time she moved her hand. She hugged me hard. "I'm so glad you're here," she said genuinely. I felt a pang of guilt. She didn't deserve any collateral damage from what was about to happen, but she deserved the truth, too. Everyone in that room did. My dad tapped his glass after about 45 minutes when the party was in full swing and everyone was gathered. He had the room's attention easily. He always did. He was that kind of man. He straightened up, cleared his throat, and his voice filled the living room like it had filled every room in that house for my entire life. "I want to say a few words about Jessica and Brandon." He started, smiling at his eldest. "About what it means to watch your kid find their person. About this family and what it stands for." He paused, looking around the room with the satisfied air of a man who was about to say something good. "In this house, we've always believed in the same things. Hard work, loyalty, sticking together. That's what the Calloway family is built on. We protect each other. We look out for each other. And we make sure that the people we love stay close." "Stay close," he repeated for emphasis. And I heard the thing underneath the words, the ideology that had been running like a current through my entire childhood. Stay close. Don't go too far. Don't want more than this. Don't leave. When he raised his glass and the room started to lift theirs, I spoke. "Before we toast," I said, loudly enough that the whole room heard, and clearly enough that there was no mistaking it for a side conversation, "there's something I need to share with everybody. It won't take long, but I think it matters." The room shifted. My dad looked at me with that specific expression, the one that meant he was deciding in real time how to respond to an unexpected variable. My mom's smile froze. "Ava," my mom started, "I've spent the last 14 months applying to over 60 jobs." I continued, speaking to the room now, not just my parents. "Finance positions, analyst roles. Exactly the kind of work I went to school for and spent 4 years preparing for. And for 14 months, I got nothing. Every interview went cold. Every offer evaporated. I thought I was doing something wrong. I thought maybe I just wasn't good enough. It was one of the worst stretches of my life." The room was completely silent. Jessica was looking at me with confusion and concern. Brandon was very still. My aunt and uncle were watching carefully. "A few weeks ago," I said, "I found out why." I reached into the folder I'd brought in and taken out when everyone's attention was on my dad's speech. I began passing the bound documents to the people around me. "What you're holding is a timeline of my job applications alongside a series of written accounts from HR departments at companies I applied to. In each case, Those companies received unsolicited phone calls claiming I had a criminal record. Those calls were made by someone who knew exactly which companies I was applying to and who had a consistent motive to keep me from getting those jobs. My dad set his beard down on the mantel. His jaw was tight. Kid. Dad. I said his name like a door closing. I looked at him steadily, and I pulled out my phone. Last page of the packet is a transcript of a conversation I recorded, but I think it's easier if you just hear it. I pressed play. The recording wasn't perfect. There was some ambient noise, the faint sound of traffic outside, but it was clear enough. My voice, asking him about what employers look for when they call references. And then his voice, careful and deliberate. When there's something in someone's past, people tend to find out eventually. And then, it's a small world, kid, especially in a town like Dayton. The room didn't just go quiet. It went heavy. The particular heaviness of a crowd of people processing something they didn't expect and genuinely don't want to be true. My mom was the first to speak. That doesn't prove anything, she said, her voice high and thin. That's a normal conversation. Mom. I turned to her with the same steadiness I'd given my dad. The HR coordinator in Cincinnati described the woman, who called as an older female with an Ohio accent, who used the phrase moral obligation. That's the phrase you use when you're about to tell someone something you know they don't want to hear. You've used it my entire life. My mother put her hand over her mouth. My Aunt Karen said, softly but clearly, Robert. Just his name. Just that. But in her voice was a whole history of knowing him, and something that sounded like shame. My dad's face went through several things in rapid succession: anger, defiance, calculation, and then, finally, something that was either guilt or the recognition that there was nowhere left to go. He looked at the room. He looked at my aunt. He looked at Phil, who had been his friend for 30 years and was currently staring at the floor. He looked at Jessica, whose eyes were bright with tears, who was holding the packet of documents and looking at her father like she was seeing a person she didn't recognize. And then he looked at me. We were trying to protect you, he said, and his voice came out lower than usual, rougher. The corporate world, you don't know what it's like out there, Ava. You've got no idea what they do to people. I built something here, something real, something that would have been yours. You didn't build something for me, I said. You built something for yourself, and you wanted me to maintain it. And when I chose my own life, you decided to dismantle it. You called those companies and lied. Both of you. You told them I had a criminal record that doesn't exist. You cost me 14 months and over 60 opportunities. And then you sat across from me at that table every Sunday and asked how the job search was going. My mom was crying now. The kind of crying that fills a room and demands to be attended to, and on any other day of my life, I would have gone to her. But I stood still. I want to be clear about something, I said, addressing the room one more time, because this part wasn't for my parents. It was for everyone else. I'm not here to blow up this family. I'm here because I needed the people who have watched my dad talk about loyalty and protection to see what that actually looked like. To see the difference between what this family says it is and what it actually did. Jessica stood up from where she'd been sitting on the arm of the couch. She crossed the room and she stood next to me, and she didn't say anything. She just stood there beside me, and that gesture, my sister choosing her position wordlessly in front of our parents and aunts and uncles and family friends, undid something in me that had been very tightly wound. My dad didn't try to deny it again. He sat down heavily in the armchair, and he looked like an old man in a way he never had before, and he put his face in his hands. My mom was saying something, still crying, but the words weren't coalescing into anything I needed to hear right then. I picked up the folder. My attorney has prepared a formal demand letter. I said to my parents directly, "You'll receive it Monday. I'm not filing a civil suit yet, but if anything like this ever happens again, I will. That's not a threat. That's information." I looked at Mia, who was standing in the doorway to the hall, and something in her face told me we were done here. I walked to her. She took my hand. "Ava," my dad said. His voice was rough and broken and small. "Kid." I stopped, but I didn't turn around. I'm not your kid right now, Dad. Right now, I'm just a person you harmed who decided not to stay quiet about it. Maybe later we can be something else. But I need time, and I need space, and I need you to understand that I didn't deserve what you did to me. No version of love looks like what you did. Then Mia and I walked out through the front door and into the cool April night, and I took the biggest breath of air I had taken in 14 months. The demand letter arrived at my parents' house on Monday, as promised. My attorney, Rachel, told me they called her office Tuesday morning. My dad's voice was flat and careful, very different from the man I'd watched disintegrate in that living room, and said they understood the seriousness of the matter and would be cooperative going forward. There was no lawsuit. There didn't need to be. The point had been made with unmistakable clarity. I started at Larkin and Associates on May 1st. My first morning walking into that office in Chicago with the lake wind in my face and the city spread out around me and a legitimate job title on a legitimate company's payroll, I stood on the sidewalk for about 30 seconds and just let it hit me. This was real. I'd done this. Despite everything they'd thrown at me, I had gotten here. Mia moved to Chicago at the end of May. She transferred her nursing license and got a position at Northwestern Memorial within 2 weeks of arriving because she was exceptional at what she did, and it had never been in question. We set up our apartment in Lincoln Park with mismatched furniture and a small balcony that looked out at the neighbors' trees, and we made it ours. Some evenings we'd sit out there with coffee and talk about the future, the actual future, the one that was now genuinely ours to build. And I'd feel something I wasn't used to feeling, which was uncomplicated happiness. Not relieved happiness or earned happiness. Just regular, ordinary, deeply satisfying happiness. The aftermath with my family was complicated. The way aftermath always is when the explosion was big enough. My Aunt Karen called me 2 weeks after the party. She was careful and kind, the way she always was, but also honest. What your parents did was wrong, she said plainly. Your uncle and I want you to know that we see that. We're not excusing it. We're still figuring out what it means for our relationships with them. Honestly. She asked if she could stay in touch. I said yes. Phil, my dad's oldest friend, apparently didn't come around the house for over a month. I heard this secondhand, through Jessica. He eventually did come back, because 30-year friendships don't just dissolve, but apparently the dynamic had permanently shifted. He'd told my dad, from what I understood, that he needed to make it right with me, that you don't treat your kid like that, and pretend it didn't happen. My dad called me in June. He asked if we could talk. I agreed, because I'm not interested in permanent estrangement. I don't think it would serve me, and I also don't think it's what I actually want. We talked for 45 minutes. He apologized, not the reflexive, defensive kind. The genuine kind, the kind where the person actually seems to understand what they did. He said he'd convinced himself he was protecting me. He said he'd told himself so many times that the corporate world would chew me up that he'd started to believe his own narrative. He said he knew that wasn't an excuse. He cried, which was the first time in my entire life I had heard my father cry. I didn't forgive him that day. But I told him I was open to the possibility of eventually forgiving him, which is not the same thing, but is something. My mom was harder. She took longer to get to a place where she could stop framing herself as the victim of the situation. The mother who only ever wanted what was best, whose concern was misunderstood. The therapist she started seeing in the summer apparently helped with that. She called me in August, and that conversation was different from the June call with my dad. Different in the way that you can tell when someone has actually been doing some work versus when they're just sorry they got caught. She talked about her own fear of loss, her own complicated relationship with change and control, her terror of her children leaving and building lives too far away to touch. She was more honest than I expected her to be. It didn't fix everything, but it helped me understand, even if understanding and forgiving aren't the same thing. Jessica and I became closer than we'd ever been. She called me the week after the party, and the conversation was the most honest we'd had since we were kids. She said she'd spent years not seeing what was happening to me, and she was sorry for that. She said she'd been the easy one and hadn't stopped to think about what that meant for the person in the house who wasn't. She came to visit us in Chicago in the fall, and she and Mia hit it off immediately, which felt like the universe deciding to give me something good. At my one-year review at Larkin and Associates, my supervisor told me I was being considered for an early promotion. I went home that evening and sat in the living room and let myself feel it, really feel it without the shadow of those 14 months, without the grief and the self-doubt and the exhaustion. I'd made it, not despite everything. In spite of it, there's a difference, and the difference matters. I used to think loyalty meant staying. Now, I know it means showing up with the truth, even when the truth costs something. Especially then. I think about that kid a lot, the one who sat in parking lots reading rejection emails, who rehearsed interview answers in bathroom mirrors at midnight, who started to believe maybe he just wasn't good enough. I want him to know he was always good enough. He was good enough the whole time. The problem was never him. The problem was that the people who were supposed to build him up had been quietly, carefully, systematically tearing him down because they were afraid of what he'd become if he got to be everything he was capable of being. I got to be it anyway. And standing in that living room on an April Saturday, handing out bound packets of evidence to people who thought they already knew the whole story of our family, that was the moment I stopped being the obedient kid who absorbed whatever he was given and started being the person I'd always had the potential to become. Controlled, clear, unafraid, telling the truth in a room where the truth had never been told before. That felt, more than any job offer or salary or Chicago skyline, like freedom. Mia proposed to me. Actually, yes, she beat me to it, down on one knee in our Lincoln Park apartment on a Sunday morning in December with a cup of coffee going cold on the table and her eyes bright and certain, and I said yes before she finished the sentence. The ring she picked was simple and beautiful, and I wore it all day, and it felt like a door opening into a life I built myself, on my own terms from the ground up, in spite of every obstacle placed deliberately in my path. That's the story. All of it, the ugly parts and the hard parts, and the parts that made me question everything I thought I knew about my family. I'm not going to wrap it up with a bow and tell you everything is perfect, because it isn't. Family is never just resolved. It's always ongoing, always being negotiated. But I can tell you that I'm okay. More than okay. I'm genuinely, honestly, solidly okay. And if you're sitting somewhere right now, wondering why everything keeps falling apart despite doing everything right, wondering if you're somehow the problem, wondering if the universe is just against you, please hear me when I say, look closer at who has access to your story. Because sometimes the obstacle isn't out there. Sometimes it's standing in your own kitchen, asking how the job search is going. If this story hit you right in the gut, if it kept you on the edge of your seat, then you already know what kind of channel this is. Real stories, real betrayal, real justice. Hit that subscribe button so you never miss the next drop. New stories every week. And trust me, they only get more intense from here.